Welcome back to the SAFESECURE 360 podcast. We are analyzing current events that are safety and security related and talking about it on our podcast. The one that comes to mind right now, really two that we're going to talk about, is the Las Vegas explosion of the Tesla and also the New Orleans, Louisiana event. American citizens killing American citizens. Stay tuned. This is the SAFESECURE 360 podcast. There is safety in numbers.
The information provided in our podcasts is for general information uses only and is not intended as legal advice. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own. Always consult with a qualified professional before making safety and security decisions. For more information about this topic, check out our website at safesecure360.com.
Well, Robert, thank you for sitting down with us. We've been talking more and more about current events on this show, and we've just been given not the gift, but the responsibility of talking about two more on New Year's Eve. Let's first focus on the Las Vegas. A man drove a Tesla truck in front of a Trump hotel filled with explosives and set the explosives off. Tell us a little bit more about this, and let's just sort of start breaking this down.
The interesting point about this incident and other recent ones that are occurring is that state-sponsored terror groups are not the ones behind this. These suspects may have an ideological connection to some type of state-sponsored group such as ISIS or Al-Qaeda, and they may say so in their publishing and broadcasting and manifestos. However, these are United States citizens in these two events that we're talking about today. And as a U.S. citizen, you have certain rights of privacy. It's more difficult to discover or to unlock or to integrate into their privacy because of their rights as U.S. citizens. If they were not, we would have more levity to do so. And there certainly are certain aspects like the Patriot Act and other types of formats that allow us to dig deeper. But it's a fascinating fact, actually, that, since 9/11, we haven't had an organized, state-sponsored terror attack that was formulated through extreme planning over years and years and resulted in the deaths of many, many people. So on one hand, we're doing really good with that, deterring terrorist events. But however, there are these isolated ones that I do not believe are state terror sponsors: Libya, Syria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, the Middle Eastern countries that commonly do this. However, they're still occurring, but it's more of a lone wolf type approach. And this Las Vegas incident is certainly very interesting.
It really is. This is a man serving in the military, and a highly decorated one at that, a Green Beret that went and worked really hard on progressing through the military and getting all of this training and being deployed and having lots of service and lots of life experiences. So what causes someone like this to have a results like this in the end? How does he go from Green Beret to renting a truck and blowing it up in front of a hotel?
A highly decorated Green Beret who apparently honorably served with no criminal history, and no link to any type of subversive or ideological group. It appears that in the Las Vegas case, this suspect, who is now deceased, wanted to send a message. And in his own way, he certainly did. But it's a complex approach. And I think, to answer your question, I think that he reached a psychological breaking point, which was motivated by, I think, mental illness, specifically PTSD, served in Afghanistan. In his manifesto, he wrote that he wanted to send a wake-up call to the country. And he wanted to cleanse his mind of the brothers and sisters in the military that he lost. And he further said, wanted to cleanse his mind of the people that he killed. So I think that he reached a point where his mental illness was pushed and pushed until he realized that he could not control his impulses and he had to do something. And I think that unfortunately, this is what happened. It could have been a lot worse. SAFESECURE 360. We are a security consulting group located in the Woodlands, Texas. We assist our multiple clients by reducing the risk, loss, and reputation impact. We also do full security assessments on their facilities, large churches, large private schools in Texas, and we want to help you. Take a look at our website, safesecure360.com.
You're right that this seems like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, the service of working and being deployed overseas and being in an active military zone where you're killing people, that's stressful. And this post-traumatic stress disorder is something we're hearing more and more about these days. It seems like it's more accepted to talk about as far as the military goes. What can we do? What can the military do? And what can we do as a society to help alleviate some of the concerns about PTSD becoming such a prevalent thing with veterans?
PTSD is a real phenomenon that occurs psychologically. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic means that you've experienced it, or you don't have to experience it yourself. You could be told about it, or you could be shown things about it. Traumatic, the trauma could be a wide range of things, from someone dying or someone suffering or someone being tortured or someone being executed or someone being injured in a war scenario or in a civilian setting as well. Stress, the inability to process and to cope with some of these traumatic events that a person may have experienced, and the disorder is that it's affecting you. It's affecting you in the way you think and the way you operate and your impulses and the way your behavior occurs. The suspect in the Las Vegas case in his manifesto went further to say that this event that he did was not a terrorist event. He describes it that way. He describes it further to say it was a wake-up call to Americans. And he said the Americans only respond to spectacles and violence. Otherwise, it doesn't get their attention. We've talked about that before in other podcasts, that when there's a less than what the media thinks significant traumatic event happened, like a school shooting, it's not front page news. It's not real popular unless a lot of people are dead and unless a lot of kids are dead. Then it seems to be more important. We've desensitized ourselves sometimes to these traumatic events that are reported. How unfortunate is that? This shooter, he wasn't a shooter, but this suspect in the Las Vegas case was armed with a Desert Eagle 50 caliber pistol, a very strong, powerful pistol, and apparently a .308 rifle. So he did not use them externally. However, the evidence is showing us that he apparently killed himself with the pistol, and the pistol blast may have ignited the gasoline and the fireworks and other materials, nitrates that were inside the Tesla. So his desire was to have an explosion, but to end his own life first and then have the explosion. It's quite unusual that he characterized it as not being a terrorist event, and it appears that it's not. It appears that it is a singular event that this person chose to do. Now, what motivated him to do that, what pushed him to that level, is still being analyzed. But he described the USA as being terminally ill and that we're headed towards a collapse, and that this was his way of sending a message about this to get our attention.
It certainly is attention-seeking behavior, and it's a brief moment in the spotlight for him, and his message is getting out. So in a way, his plan worked. How can we... It seems like there would be something that we can do to preempt something like this from happening, whether it be more rigorous screening. I couldn't find validated information, but I found some information about a mental health, sort of like a few boxes are getting checked in his service history. He's taking more and more mental health days. He's enlisting the help of a counselor. What goes into curbing attention-seeking behavior after coming home from something so traumatic as a wartime, where rules that civilians follow, they don't apply here? When you come home, it might be easy, I don't know, but it might be easy to fall into breaking rules and finding bigger and bigger ways to make your point. So I guess my question is, how can we recognize attention-seeking behavior but as it's starting, as it's becoming a small thing, and coordinate with mental health experts? Because it sounds like those two things combined are the catalyst of this thing, mental health plus attention. So what can we do in the future to learn from this and to help other people that are going through something similar that this man was?
I would start fundamentally with looking at his background. We trained him in the military to be a strategic thinker. To receive Bronze Stars and to be a Green Beret is very difficult. Few people can do it. So we know that if you're able to obtain that level of training and that level of experience, you are a strategic thinker. You develop plans, you set goals, you set objectives, and then you take certain steps to attain those objectives, right? This was a planned out event that was probably planned for months or longer. It's very unusual that he describes this as a non-terrorist event. He just wanted to send a message. However, evidence is showing us that inside the Tesla vehicle, there are around 70 pounds of lead or steel small ball bearings or shot that is used in like a shotgun shell. So if your intent was to just kill yourself and send a message for America to wake up, it's confusing as to why you would have that projectile base of 70 pounds of material in your vehicle with you, unless your intent was to explode it and allow that shot to affect other people. This is a strategic plan component that he had. Why choose a Trump hotel? Why choose a Musk Tesla vehicle? He states in his manifesto that he would like to rally around Trump. He rented this Tesla vehicle in Colorado and drove it to Las Vegas. And very unusual and interesting that Turo was the company he rented from. It's like a person peer-to-peer rental. The same company used in the New Orleans incident, where the suspect in that case also rented a Turo F-150 from Texas and drove it to Louisiana. So there are similarities there in these two cases. So his plan to send a message and to simply kill himself affected other people. There were 7 people who were injured in the Tesla Las Vegas event. There could have been a lot more. I think choosing that vehicle was one of the best decisions he made, because it had kind of protection with the way the vehicle's made up, that it kind of blew up rather than blow away. And he parked it right in front of a hotel. So was his intent to send a message to the new president that you're vulnerable, your properties are vulnerable? Was it an attempt to send a message to Elon Musk that your vehicles are vulnerable? I don't know. But the way he put gas cans and fuel and fireworks and other items in the vehicle was really a primitive approach. It wasn't a technical, calculated, high-tech type approach. And the gas and the fumes and the air and the ignition source, probably from when he shot the gun and killed himself, was enough to ignite the vehicle's explosives and therefore cause some injury. But think about it. What if there would have been a lot of people standing around? What if there would have been a valet? What if there would have been people standing in line waiting to recover their cars? What if it was a large gathering? He chose that location for a reason. So I think that that will determine later what his motivations were. But it's clear that if they were self-focused, there were other things that confused that theory because of the things he had in that vehicle.
So he says this isn't a terrorist attack. And what would be different about it? What would make it a terrorist attack? What would have to be different about it to make this? Would it need to be instructed by a group? Is that what qualifies for a terrorist attack? Maybe we could define what that is and then talk about the difference between this and what a terrorist attack might look like.
I personally would define a terror attack as an organized state sponsor of some other country, perhaps, who has an agenda to harm or kill or impact United States citizens' property, places. Certainly 9/11 is a primary example of that. There was a very organized, probably 100 people involved in it. Ultimately, around 15 of them actually were the real actors in this, but masterminded from a foreign country, masterminded by a religious ideology, masterminded to punish the United States as infidels and to influence them to switch religions or to be suffering because of the things that this country has done in their mind to them. So I think a terrorist event is an organized effort with a lot of planning. And certainly there are lone wolf, single cell things that happen like this. And I don't think this is over. I think we're going to continue to see disorganized individual events like this that are going to have severe consequences to people in our country. But I think if this was a planned terror event, the target would have been much more devastated by this event. I think they would have picked a large event similar to the New Orleans event, where there was a large congregation of people and where their act of lone wolf singular terrorism would have affected a lot of people versus 7 people injured. That probably was not a goal or desire of an organized international terrorist group.
Yeah, I see the difference in what you're stating, that a terrorist attack might be to hurt the most amount of people, and there's a lot of group organization that go into that, although sometimes it's single people. This doesn't feel like a suicide exactly, and it doesn't feel quite like a terrorist attack either. So it's sort of something in the middle ground. In fact, a lot of things about this just sort of feel like they were copied and pasted from other crimes and other ideas. There were a lot of ideas when you read through the manifesto throughout this. He believed he was being tracked by the government. He had some conspiracy thinking that he was going through. A lot of people are exposed to more and more with social media, are exposed to conspiracy thinking, maybe without even realizing that's what it is. Maybe they just think they're watching the news and they're getting an interesting take. So how can we as a regular person watching this, not a regular person, but how can we as a society watching the same types of news information that he's getting, how can we stay mentally sound as we're being exposed to all of these events that keep happening and all of this ideology that's coming out on the internet? How do we stay stable as a society during all this?
I think we are exposed to nonstop input of information. And I think that two words come to mind, balance and perspective. I think if you can balance out these terrible things that are being reported and put them into some type of personal perspective, I think that is a good way to start. When incidents like this become very personalized because you were a victim or you knew a victim or it was in your town or it was in your city or it was in your school, it's much more difficult to balance that out and to be able to rationalize why that happened or what could we have done to prevent it from happening. The preventative measures in this Tesla case, what could you have done unless you were able to determine a pattern or series of signals or signs that the suspect was displaying or broadcasting or talking to other people about? This appears to be his motivation is one of dissatisfaction with the government and being surveilled by the government and being pressured by the government. And on the other side of the coin, he is a fully trained, fully effective operator that we've spent hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million or more, to train and teach and coach and learn and equip. So it's very interesting to see what made him go over the edge, and were there signs? His family said, his wife was interviewed, and she said she had no idea about this happening. She had no ahead of the time anything to let her know this was happening. He just disappeared, and she had not heard from him for a couple of days. So did he tell his friends? Did he tell his compatriots that he worked with in the military? Did someone have a heads up on this that could have alerted law enforcement? I don't know. But I think that that's our only chance if a lone actor like this decides to do an event like this, unless someone discovers him in the preparation phases, or if someone discovers a broadcast or a message that he sends saying, hey, don't be in Las Vegas tomorrow at 4 o'clock. He may be doing that to broadcast a message of safety to who he wants to exclude from this event. So it's very complicated how this person was thinking, and it's very important that, again, the basic principle of see something, say something applies once again. If you saw this person deteriorating psychologically, if you saw this person making plans that will appear to be of violent end, then certainly that should be reported and investigated and stopped if possible.
We had a previous episode called We Are Missing the Warning Signs before this happened, where we were talking about, in a lot of cases of things like this, people are telling people they know around them, and either those people don't know how to or don't feel comfortable reporting that. In our 911 episode, you talked about when a situation gets to be out of your control, it's time to call 911. I think that if someone is telling you, don't be in Vegas tomorrow, I'm driving there now, that is a situation that's a little bit out of your control and may be warranted calling 911. Maybe there should be... So we talked earlier about how much money went into his training, and I'm observing how many resources are going into the investigation effort after this fact. I'm wondering, how could we allocate resources in a preventative way to where how could resources be used towards mental health or towards investigating people, or having when you leave the military, you have a special resource available to you to help you with these things? Are there any good ideas that policymakers that might be listening could consider for how to use resources in the future to help things like this become less and less prevalent?
It's my opinion that the military over the last 10 years, 15 years has made great strides in identifying PTSD and identifying traumatic brain injuries that our veterans are exposed to and experience. You see more and more and more advertisements on television about helping our wounded warriors, or helping Fields of Honor, or helping our veterans who are returning. And a lot of times people focus on the physical injuries and the physical things that happen to them. And there's less, because you can see them, you can relate to them. If this soldier who bravely served now has no legs, or has no arms, or he's burned, or she's disfigured in some way, you can understand it. It's a visual impact that you don't have to really think about too much. But what about other injuries? What about psychological injuries that people see that are uncommon, that a human being should never see? What about those impacts? And are we doing enough in the military to assist and comfort and support and counsel those folks who see traumatic and have seen traumatic things happen? And then when they do return to civilian life, is there a transactional transition period that occurs where we give them close support, where we de-escalate them from being on at 100% going to do a mission, and now they're going to H-E-B to go shopping? And let's say the police pull them over for some reason, some alleged traffic violation perhaps, and the police officer walks up to the car. 48 hours ago, this serviceman or woman was in a combat arena. Now he's being, or she's being, pulled over on the street by law enforcement in what can be perceived as an adversarial conflict scenario. So what happens psychologically to that person who we've trained to do many things, but the primary thing is to survive and to defend themselves? And there becomes an interaction between that veteran and the police officer, or that veteran and someone in the store who accidentally bumps their cart, or there's some type of interpersonal conflict that they engage in. How are we de-escalating, and how are we conditioning those people for a soft landing back in society after we have ramped them up, tuned them up, trained them to do exactly what their role should be in the military? It's an interesting thing to think about. my answer is I think we're making progress, but I think we need to do more.
It sounds like we do. I mean, however you want to look at it, this is a statistic that's showing that there's more work to be done about decommissioning someone from the military and rejoining into civilian life. It's so different. Maybe there's people listening who were in the service or were police officers or were in EMS or had some kind of traumatic situation. Earlier, you talked about balance and perspective. How can a person know that their thinking or their worldview is starting to slip from a healthy place? What are the warning signs personally of maybe if I knew something was happening, I could stop myself before I get to the point where I'm making a plan to hurt someone? What are some warning signs that would start to ding in my head if I was paying attention for me, if I'm just living my life and feel a change? How would I know that I'm losing perspective or losing balance?
There are three ways really to know. One, personally, if you are depressed or you're having night terrors or you're having hallucinations or you're reliving these moments over and over and over, which feel real to you, that is certainly an abnormal existence, that something's wrong, that you are reliving these things over and over and over again, and you self-identify that, that's true, that you may tell someone or you may not. But an unrealized treatment plan with that type of dramatic, serious, critical PTSD going on is not going to have a good ending. The second way to realize this is externally. Your family, your friends, do they notice that you're depressed or withdrawn, or they notice that you're hypersensitive? Do they notice that you are on alert all the time? Do they notice that you are to an extreme worried? Do you feel like you're being followed? Do you feel like there's some conspiracy against you? Do you feel like you're being targeted for some reason? And does that behavior manifest itself where others around you become concerned? The third type is going to be in a work or social setting where you begin to exhibit characteristics on your job that are not reasonable or that are unusual, where you become to alarm or alert or concern your employees or your co-employees or your management of where you work. I think that employee assistance programs in that regard have come a long way. Certainly they have in police work. We have a robust employee assistance program where we help police officers and done a lot with that to bring us forward. I think that that's a great idea. So whether it's internal, whether it's a family, or whether it's a work scenario or a social setting where these characteristics and these thoughts and these behaviors start to manifest themselves, it's time to talk to someone and seek out professional assistance in helping you cope and balance those things.
When you're describing the symptoms of PTSD, night terrors and things, and these are physical, you can't fake your way out of these type of physical reactions to trauma. I wonder if some people don't even realize that something's wrong. They're so used to that for so long that they sort of get used to the idea that there's this nagging terror in their head. And it requires, like you're saying, the second layer, if you can't see anymore, the second layer is people around you caring for you and tending to you or noticing changes in you can be really helpful. So friends and family of people, pay attention to your loved ones, and you may be able to help them recover from something rather than keeping to go off in the deep end. So it seems, and then in work too, it seems these are social constructs that we're social creatures, humans, and we're around each other a lot. And that's the good and bad of this, that these are people that are used to doing things a certain way that come around a lot of people, and everything's different now. And so I think it's great to hear that there are resources for people, whether it's your friends and family or an assistance at work. There are resources that are here to help you. If you wanted to find more resources and you were feeling under mental duress or feeling really overwhelmed or stressed all the time, or every one of those symptoms you just said applies to you, who would you call in that case, or how would you get help?
Certainly, a lot of places are available to help. If you are considering, or if someone you know is considering suicide or harming themselves, certainly the National Suicide Hotline is the place to call. If you are an employee of a company that has an employee assistance program, that may be a real good place for you to go. You may also want to speak to your personal physician or speak to someone who deals with PTSD in a supportive way to be able to get some perspective about this is happening to me, but it's also happening to a lot of other people. You're not alone, and together perhaps we can process this and get better.
Well, I love that you're not alone. That's so true. When you're suffering, it's very easy to think no one knows how I feel. But the benefit of more and more of these things coming out, cases like this happening, there are so many negatives to this. But the benefit is that people are starting to really take action about studying what PTSD does. And what that means is that doctors will be more prepared to talk to their patients about it and have more resources about helping them understand what's going on. I think it's very valuable to find some help when you're feeling like you need it. What else can we learn from this? For me, when something is, the way my brain works, when something is overwhelming, I want to sit down and learn something from it so I can feel like I can move on with my life. What can we learn from a horrible incident like this where someone took their own life in a public, violent way with a message behind it that hurt other people? What can we learn from that?
I think we need to learn to watch for the signs. I think we need to learn to support our families and support our veterans and support our law enforcement, our fire, EMS. Don't forget about our dispatchers who have a very intense job. I'll tell you this, I've seen in the past few years that the stigma that kind of cloaks PTSD and mental illness generally is dissolving some. You know, if you were to say, oh, I have high blood pressure, or if I have diabetes, or if I have some type of illness, chronic or acute illness, it's not uncomfortable to talk about that and say, oh, I do too, or my brother has the same thing. But it's certainly more difficult to talk about mental illness. And the brain is an organ, and the brain can become ill. So mental illness is some type of disease or defect or some type of imbalance, chemically perhaps, biomedically perhaps, and it's an illness as well. So I think that people are more likely now than in the past to declare that they have a mental illness, to declare that they're depressed, to declare that they are in some type of treatment program or taking some type of medication for it. Almost every commercial that you see on television talks about, I'm addressing my mental illness by taking this medication, or I've talked to my doctor about these symptoms that I'm feeling because of some mental illness. So that's good. That's progress. That is progress in identifying and treating mental illness before it gets to be something really bad. Remember this, people that are mentally ill, it's very common. There's certainly different levels of it. But in no way am I characterizing someone with a mental illness as someone who can do a devastating act of violence and kill other people or have that intent. These are extreme examples of people who have chosen this path, and I think that they're rare, but I think that when they do what they intend to do, there are significant consequences that happen. So we certainly want to get ahead of this by looking for the signs and trying to point that person in the direction of help.
It's so interesting that you call this a path. And I like how you just framed that. A person with a mental illness is not the same as a person who can commit acts of mass violence. Those are not necessarily the same thing, but there's a path from one to the other. And if we started spending more time recognizing what the steps of that path look like, we may be able to intervene sooner. And that's what I hear you saying, that recognizing, seeing and saying something, and then recognizing in the people around you that something's different about you. What's going on? Those are such helpful qualities that could really stray someone from a path of violence and lead them back to a path of healing or a path of taking care of themselves or finding a new way to live. Is there anything else that you think is important for us to know about this? You know, these examples are showing us humanity in a way. They're showing us the extremes of how people feel, but this is one example of how somebody felt. Is there anything else that this makes you think of or that we should understand as a people so we could learn from this and heal?
This Las Vegas incident was very difficult to predict, especially if you were at the scene where this driver just decides to pull up. There's really nothing you could have done if you were there. Nothing unusual, no clues or cues were exhibited by his driving method. He didn't try to run anyone over. He didn't try to speed into the parking lot. He just drove his vehicle in. It's a remarkable looking vehicle, which may draw attention to it, but nothing unusual. So I always say that being aware of your environment and being aware of what's going on around you pays big dividends. And if you see something that looks uncomfortable or you have that intuition or you feel like perhaps this is not a good scenario, remove yourself from it and get away from it. And that may pay you off in the end. So I think that that how unfortunate this incident was, I'm glad that it wasn't worse than it was. And I do believe that there will be others like this, and we need to learn from these experiences and foremost try to prevent them. That's the key.
Well, thank you, Robert, for your insight into this. And if you at home are suffering or you know someone who's suffering from mental illness of any kind, it's okay to ask for help. Ask for help from the people around you or use some of the resources we outlined for you in this episode. We would love everyone to feel happy and healthy and safe and secure. That's why we do this podcast. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back with more soon. We're starting to do 2 episodes a week. If you like the format, let us know. If there's something you want to see an episode about, let us know. We're here to help you guys understand. So thank you for watching, and we'll be back. This is the Safe Secure 360 podcast. There's safety in numbers.